any new ATS, get the team in as quickly as possible. Don't make the data migration be the reason why the team is not going live because you want the data to be in there. There's always going to be some kind of gap in data because by the time that you request it, your previous ATS provides it. There is a gap. You requested, let's say today, they give it to you tomorrow. Anything in those 24 hours that was added into that other ATS is not going to be part of it.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly, and welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today we've got a great Tactical Tuesday episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday like today for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. And occasionally you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. As a reminder, if you like the content that we share here on the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, today's Tactical Tuesday. 2 words that I'm 99% willing to bet will evoke a strong emotion from you. Data migration. We've all experienced them. More likely than not, we've had a bad experience with at least one of them. So my question for you is, are you staying on a legacy ATS despite knowing that it's holding you back because you simply don't want to deal with the data migration? If so, that's a problem. We should probably be thinking about it. But what if I also said data migrations could be less daunting and actually quite easy if you structure them properly? So would that get your attention? Would you want to know how that's even possible, to be honest? So here to join us and unpack this topic is your favorite Tactical Tuesday co-host, Vivien. Vivien, welcome.
Hello.
Oh yeah, data migration's the most fun thing in our space. But we've been chatting about this. Like, it's really, everyone has a bad taste in their mouth because they've had that one experience that just like was like, oh my God, I'm never doing this again. But it's not always that way, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's definitely some things that we can do to stack the deck in our favor going into these. So tell me a little bit about, you were just like, data migrations are actually not as daunting as we think. Like, please share your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think I've done like well over 100 data migrations and onboardings at this point. So I know a little bit about that. And I've went through a data migration as a recruiter and I was on a receiving end of it. So I totally get why people are super scared of it. If they've never done it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. We're going to lose our data. We need our data. So it makes sense that recruiters and managers and agency owners are terrified of this. This is a very, very high risk thing to do because recruiters live on data. However, data is not what it used to be. People change jobs every 2 to 5 years. So within 2 to 5 years, your data is going to be outdated. I'm not saying this to kind of be like, you don't need a data migration altogether. You do need it, but it's a matter of changing your perspective on how you think about the data migration and what's actually important and what isn't. And so the truly important pieces are your notes on the candidate after you have talked to them, if you've pitched them, how have you pitched them, which job have you pitched them to, who's the hiring manager. These are critical information that actually are more so like where you're interacting with a client as well, not just the candidate. If you're just sourcing, contacting, and they never get back to you, great to have in your database, but how many recruiters are starting a search in their database? Most are not because the data is outdated. Usually the default is they go into Loxo Source, or they go into LinkedIn, or they go to various job boards, and they just go to all these different places to start. And so the profiles themselves, I think people are a little bit attached to them because back in the paper days, you had to have them. That was your lifeline as a recruiter. And now everything is online. If you don't migrate someone because you haven't talked to them in 5 years, you know for a fact their profile and the data you have on them is outdated. Toss them. You're going to find them again somewhere online. You're going to stumble upon them. So that piece of it is not that critical, but it's more so the notes and the activities that people want to have. And this is where the best thing that people can do is go to your ATS provider and request a formal backup. Sometimes they will say you have to pay for it, but what you're paying for is good structured data so that your new ATS can actually properly import it, because there is an industry standard that all ATSs are working with, they're familiar with. If they've done a migration for that particular ATS before, they have a template where everything is mapped correctly, it will go in correctly. If you try to jimmy rig it one way or another and like try to like circumvent having the fee, you're saving money here, but you're paying for it in the long run with data that is bad and just a poor experience. And unfortunately, it is what it is. But kind of like flip how you think about the data that you have. How solid is the data? And what's the actual critical data that you want? It's placements, it's jobs, it's key contacts, key people, and those are always going to come over. So it's kind of like flip it a little bit.
Yeah, and how commoditized is that data? Because like you said before, like your little black book was everything. I know Vivien Maron. I have her contact information. No one else can get it because she gave it to me with her business card when I met her at this event. But now it's insert any contact information finding platform, any sourcing platform. You can get that information so easily. So yeah, if it, like you said, if it's 5 years outdated and everything else, like you have no competitive edge with that because anyone else can find that.
Yeah. And with that, also take an honest look at whether how was the team using the system. Did it just exist so that they put the bare minimum in? Then the data is really not that valuable. Should you do a data migration? That is entirely up to you. Is it very high risk? Not really. If it's like medium usage, that's fairly standard, where people try to add as much as possible for reporting purposes and they add the notes and things like that, but they really don't live in it. It's just more of like a tracking type tool. That's very standard. Every ATS knows how to bring in that data. If it's very high usage, as long as the system is used correctly. So for example, if the team is constantly just logging a note about like, okay, they're going for an interview, versus how the system intended it to is to log that an interview is taking place. Obviously, that's not going to come over correctly because the data was entered incorrectly. So those are little things, but ultimately the data is still going to be there. So even though it was logged incorrectly, it's still going to be there. You can still review the historical data. You still have all of that. And ultimately, when you really look at how people are using their data, it is very rare for recruiters to rely on past data. Most start every single search from scratch. They barely reuse any of the data that they've had. And this is where they have to email a lot of people, and then email deliverability issues start coming in and things like that. So look at your usage, look at how heavily it was being used, what data was really being entered. If people are just leaving notes and like left a voicemail, tried calling 5 times, emailed 20 times, never heard back, that's not really valuable data. And the other piece to that is the perfect data migration, that everything is in the perfect spot before the team can go in and all that kind of stuff. That's typically something that I see on the operational level, that is very important. And then recruiters are a little bit more like, it is what it is. I know the data. It's there. It's not where I expected it, but it's there. I know how to use it, and they just keep it moving. They're not that fussy about it typically.
Yeah. You said a couple of things in there that had me. We recently moved. Moving is a pain in the ass. It's kind of like a data migration in a sense. One thing that when you're on the backside of it, though, you really do like is it forces you to go through drawers, go through closets, go through the garage, go through anything and everything, and you're cleaning up a lot of junk. And that's what you're also doing as part of this migration. So yeah, part of it's like, oh, I'm losing this data or that data. It's like, well, did you use it? Was it unstructured? Was it clogging things up? Was it creating noise? So that's one thing where I always say, like, just because some data didn't come over correctly, like, was it used in the first place, or was it just adding to something that wasn't needed? The other side of it that you were saying there is, that example with the logging as activity versus an interview. Oh, this didn't migrate my information over correctly. No, the input was incorrect. You have poor processes. You have poor hygiene. No matter where you migrate to, yes, like your current platform, I guess if you're used to that, that's okay. But that's going to catch up with you some form or fashion along the way. That's going to be an issue that will come up whether you stay with that ATS or not. So it's also a really good opportunity to just pause and reflect and look at what you're doing. It may have worked when it's just you in the organization. Now you've got 2 recruiters with you. That's going to have to change. You're going to have to update your processes at that point. So some of these are they're not harsh truths, but they're those things when your parents, like growing up, your parents like, I told you this was going to happen and you should have listened. Like these are those little lessons where, it might be painful, but it's going to help you in the long run to do the right things, doing them the right way.
Yeah. And the number one thing that I would say is any new ATS, get the team in as quickly as possible. Don't make the data migration be the reason why the team is not going live because you want the data to be in there. The cold, harsh truth is that there's always going to be some kind of gap in data because by the time that you request it, your previous ATS provides it. There is a gap. You requested, let's say today, they give it to you tomorrow. Anything in those 24 hours that was added into that other ATS is not going to be part of it. You want to do a second pass, the same thing is going to happen. There's going to be some kind of delay. The best life hack that I have for that is get the system set up as quickly as possible, get the team in, book off a Friday, do like a pizza party, have everybody block off like 2 to 4 hours and just add the critical data, add the searches, add the people. It's uncomfortable, but what this actually ends up doing is the team has a chance to really get into the new system by adding all the jobs that they need to add, adding all the people, moving them to the right stages, adding the most recent critical activities, resumes. Those are the basic things that you have to do in every ATS, doesn't matter which one it is. And when they're doing this in an environment where it's just like, hey, guys, we blocked off a data entry block. We're going to make a pizza party in the conference room. Just come prepared to just enter your data. This is non-negotiable. It's a low pressure environment where they can actually do all of this. The biggest kind of like risk, it's not really that big of a risk, is you train the team, you expect them to be in there because the data is in there, they haven't had a chance to play around with it, and all of a sudden they're getting a call, they're not supposed to enter anything into the old ATS, and suddenly they have a screening call and they're like, I don't know what to do. And they're clicking around trying to familiarize themselves really quickly. If you give them a little data entry exercise, that is the best way to train them. So you can put them through a training session and all that kind of stuff, and that's super helpful. 10 out of 10 recommend, otherwise they're not even gonna know how to enter the data. But just by having them enter the data, it teaches them the basics, it gets them familiar, they'll know what to do, they're more likely to use it. The number one reason why people don't end up using it is because they don't know how to use it and they're terrified to ask a question that they feel like they should already know. And then they kind of like get resistant, they hate it, adoption gets really low, all that fun stuff. It just makes things unnecessarily difficult. Have them enter the data and it's okay. You guys need to be comfortable. Any questions that you have, just ask them. There's no dumb questions. Have internal kind of like sessions to make sure adoption is good. Everybody knows the system. And then do the data migration. The data is going to be in there. Most recruiters have all of their stuff memorized and in LinkedIn projects, whether you like it or not, it just is what it is. And by the time that the data migration finishes, the data is going to be in there. Most people haven't really missed it, but they're glad that it's back, that it's accessible again. And most of the time people realize the data really wasn't that big of a deal as I thought. And the data migration got all the data that we needed. We're good, you know?
I like that you said do it quick. I'm fully with you. Rip the Band-Aid off on it. We have a tendency to overthink. Humans, recruiters, anyone. The longer you let something sit, the more you're going to start poking holes in it, second guess yourself. And the other side of it is the more that you put things off, the more daunting they become. I've had a task on my to-do list, honestly, that's going to take me 15 minutes this week. It's not hard, but I pushed it from Monday to Tuesday, Tuesday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Thursday. And now I'm just like, mentally, I've made it become this bigger thing than it really is. It's totally psychological, but the same exact thing here. If I just rip the Band-Aid off and do it, it's going to be easy. So rip the Band-Aid off. And like you said, get your team in quick, like throw them into the deep end, do the migration. You're going to learn the product. You're going to understand how the fields work, how to move through the system versus being in theory or not quite sure. So yeah, any other actionable steps to wrap this one up?
Not really an actionable step, more of like if you want to hear it from a Loxa customer, we did an episode with Isabel from Protus Global. And the cool thing about the Protus Global team is that they had the ACE talent recruiters team get into Loxa when there was no data migration hasn't started. The Protus Global team waited until after the data migration was done. And one of the things that Isabel mentioned on that episode is that adoption, there was no difference. Success was no difference between the two teams. The only thing that in hindsight she did is she would get the other team in earlier because the data wasn't as critical as she initially thought. And the team that went live without any data in the system, they showed that to her. So you don't have to hear it from Loxo. You can hear it from a Loxo customer.
Yes. We will find a link for that episode. I forget which number, but yeah, if you search Isabel, Isabel, in your podcast player, you'll find that episode. All right, Viv. Well, as we said, this doesn't always sound like a fun topic, but I think, just making it less scary, and when we know it's in the best interest of us to go about it, like, it's not as hard as we think. We can get through it. So, data migrations, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this conversation here. So as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode but you're not sure where to go next, we do have a link to a similar one in the show notes, and you can find that in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website. We do have full video episodes available on YouTube. If you ever have questions, send them our way, podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, if you love this episode, please make sure to leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It's going to take you 3 seconds, but it will help other recruiters like you to find us. So, all right, everyone, that's the show. That was another great Tactical Tuesday with Vivien. Until next time, bye, y'all.